Hey everyone, welcome. Quick thought. If I said, Mary kissed John, instead of John kissed Mary, the meaning flips completely, right? Just by switching the word order, everything changes. That might feel almost magical, especially if your first language is something like Korean, Japanese, or Latin, where word endings or particles keep the meaning the same no matter how you move the words around. In Korean, for instance, Johnny Meri에게 키스했다 and Meri에게 Johnny 키스했다 both mean John kissed Mary, but in English, word order is everything. Today's session is about unlocking that system, the secret code of English word order. This is one of the most essential grammar skills for the 2026 TOEFL writing section, but honestly, it's valuable for anyone who's ever wondered how English sentences really work and why their structure matters so much. So buckle up, because we're about to turn ordinary grammar into something genuinely exciting. Now, let's start with a quick overview of the 2026 TOEFL writing section. The new version has 3 parts. First, there's Build a Sentence, where you fill in the blanks by arranging given words in the correct grammatical order. Next comes email writing, and finally, academic discussion writing. Today, we're focusing on the very first part, Build a Sentence. If you'd like to get a broader view of all 3, I recommend checking out Dr. Byrne's excellent video titled 2026 TOEFL Skills You Need to Master. So what exactly happens in this Build a Sentence task? You'll see 10 incomplete sentences, each with the set of words provided. Your job is to arrange those words into a grammatically correct English sentence. This task is really a test of your understanding of English word order, not just vocabulary or grammar in isolation, but how everything fits together naturally. And that's why this question type is so important. It tests the kind of instinct native speakers have automatically, that sense that this just sounds right. But for language learners, that sound isn't magic, it's logic. And that's exactly what we'll uncover today, the logic behind English tense structure. Now, you might be wondering, why does English rely so much on word order, while other languages seem more flexible? The answer lies deep in how the language is built. English doesn't use a rich system of endings to mark who's doing what, unlike languages like Korean, Japanese, or Latin, which use inflections or particles to show grammatical relationships. In English, if you change the order, you change the meaning, sometimes completely. The basic word order in English is simple enough. Subject, verb, object. The subject usually comes before the verb, and the object comes after it. But, and this is where things get interesting, that's not always the case. In some sentence constructions, the verb comes before the subject, and sometimes the subject disappears entirely. Why does that happen? To understand that, we need to look at something called mood, or in grammar terms, the mode of the sentence. Mood tells us the speaker's attitude, whether they're stating a fact, asking a question, giving an order, expressing emotion, or describing an unreal situation. English has 5 grammatical moods. Indicative, which states a fact, it is raining. Interrogative, which asks a question, is it raining? Imperative, which gives an order, close the door. Exclamatory, which shows emotion, what a beautiful day. Subjunctive, which describes unreal situations, if I were you, I'd study more. In speech, you can often hear the difference. Interrogative sentences rise in pitch at the end, while indicative statements fall. In writing, we rely on punctuation. A period for indicative, a question mark for interrogative, and an exclamation mark for exclamatory or imperative sentences. Now here's the key point. Different moods use different word order. That means when you tackle TOEFL Build a Sentence questions on the TOEFL, the very first thing you should do is identify the mood. Is the sentence making a statement, asking a question, giving an order, or expressing emotion? That single step will tell you what structure to expect. Let's test that idea with our sample TOEFL sentences. When we look closely, we see that 7 of them end with a question mark, meaning they're in the interrogative mood, and only 3 end with a period, meaning they're in the indicative or subjunctive mood. That's a big clue. Most of these sentences are questions, so you'll need to understand how English rearranges word order when it's asking something. Before we start flipping words around for questions, let's get solid on the foundation, the indicative mood, the structure of a normal English statement. Think of this as the default setting of English grammar.
the calm before the grammatical storm. In an indicative sentence, the word order is steady and predictable. Subject plus verb plus complement. The subject tells us who or what the sentence is about, and the verb tells us what that subject does or is. Everything that comes after, the nouns, adjectives, or phrases that complete the meaning, are called complements. Now, English verbs come in different types, and depending on which one you're using, the structure of the sentence shifts slightly. But the good news is there are only 5 basic patterns you need to know, and once you master them, you can build almost any sentence in English. Let's walk through them. Type 1, perfect intransitive. Structure, S plus V. Example, it is raining. No object, no complement. The verb stands alone and the sentence is complete. Simple, right? Type 2, imperfect intransitive. Structure, S plus V plus SC. Subject complement. Example, it was hot yesterday. Here, the verb was needs a complement, something that describes or renames the subject. Hot tells us how it was. Type 3, perfect transitive. Structure, S plus V plus DO, direct object. Example, I kicked the ball. Now, the verb transfers the action to something else, the ball. Without that object, the sentence feels unfinished. I kicked what? You need the direct object to complete the idea. Type 4, ditransitive. Structure S plus V plus DO plus ID. Indirect object, direct object. Example, I gave her the ball. Here, her is the indirect object, the receiver, and the ball is the thing being given. 2 objects, 1 action. Type 5, transitive with object complement. Structure S plus V plus DO plus OC, direct object, object complement. Example, I called the ball Wilson. Here, the ball is the object, and Wilson renames or describes it, the complement that tells us what the ball was called. And there it is, the secret blueprint of English sentences. You can decorate it with adjectives, adverbs, or entire phrases, but no matter how long or fancy your sentence becomes, these 5 accord structures never change. They're like the skeleton under all the layers of language. So, whatever you're building or analyzing a sentence, here's the golden process. First, find the subject. Figure out who or what the sentence is about. Next, match the verb with the subject in number and tense. A singular subject takes is or was, and a plural subject takes are or were. Then, find the complements. What completes the idea? Is the verb transitive or intransitive? Does it need an object or does it stand alone? Finally, add modifiers, all those descriptive extras that make your sentence richer. Adjectives, adverbs, relative clauses, time expressions, or prepositional phrases. They're like the color and texture of your sentence, but they never change the core pattern underneath. So far, so good. That's the world of the indicative mood. It's straightforward, reliable, and logical. But remember earlier, we noticed that 7 of our 10 TOEFL build-a-sentence questions ended with a question mark. That means it's time to step into the next mood, the interrogative, where English flips the rules, inverts the order, and puts your understanding of structure to the test. Ready?
All right, now we're stepping into the wild side of English grammar, the interrogative mood. This is where sentences start asking questions, flipping words around, and testing whether you really understand the skeleton of English. Remember how in the indicative mood, the subject usually comes first, then the verb, then the object? Well, in interrogative sentences, English loves to play tricks. So how does it work? The key is inversion, putting the verb before the subject.
But not just any verb can jump to the front. Usually it's auxiliary verbs like be, have, or do, or modal verbs like can, would, should. The main verb usually stays put. It doesn't lead the charge. Let's break it down with a yes-no question. Take the indicative sentence, she knows the answer. To turn it into a yes-no question, we add the auxiliary does and invert. Does she know the answer? Notice what happened. The auxiliary does jumps before the subject she, and the main verb know stays in its base form. That's classic English question logic.
Now, what if you're asking for specific information instead of a simple yes or no? That's when question words, also called WH words, come into play. Words like what, where, who, which, when, why, and how introduce questions that ask for specific details. These words always come first in the sentence, but here's the important part. What happens after them depends on their role in the sentence. Depending on whether the WH word is acting as the subject, the object, an adjective, or an adverbial, the word order changes. Let's break it down carefully. First, when the WH word is the subject. If the WH word itself is the one doing the action, we don't change the word order. There is no inversion. That means we don't move an auxiliary verb to the front, and we don't add do, does, or did. The WH word simply takes the subject position, and the rest of the sentence follows the same pattern as a normal statement. For example, we say, who called you? Here, who is the one performing the action. Another example, what caused the problem? What is the thing doing the causing? In both cases, the word order stays the same as in a statement. Subject first, then verb. Next, when the WH word is the object. If the WH word is receiving the action instead of performing it, then English uses inversion. This means we flip the normal order and place the auxiliary verb, such as do, does, or did, before the subject. For example, what did you see? Here, what is the object of see? Or, who did she invite? In this case, who is the object of invite. So, whenever the WH word is the object, we invert the order. WH word, auxiliary, subject, and main verb. Then we have WH words that act as adverbials. Sometimes the WH word doesn't refer to a person or a thing, but gives extra information about time, place, reason, or manner. In that case, we also use inversion, just like with objects. For example, where have you been? When will they arrive? Why are you late? How did she learn English? In each case, the WH word comes first, followed by the auxiliary verb, the subject, and then the main verb. Now, let's talk about WH words that function as adjectives. This part is often overlooked. Some WH words, especially what and which, can act as adjectives because they modify a noun. That noun can either be the subject or the object, and that determines whether inversion happens. For example, what movie did you watch? Here, movie is the object, so there is inversion. But in which restaurant serves sushi, the noun restaurant is the subject, so the word order stays normal, and there's no inversion. So before deciding on the structure, always ask yourself what role that WH word is playing. Is it the subject, the object, or an adverbial? Once you know that, you'll know whether to invert or not. Finally, let's look at indirect questions. This is where many learners get confused. An indirect question is when a question is built inside another sentence, often after verbs like ask, know, wonder, tell, or explain. We also use expressions like, can you tell me? Do you know? Or, I wonder. Let's compare the two forms. In a direct question, you might say, where is the bank? But in an indirect question, you would say, can you tell me where the bank is? Notice the difference? In the indirect version, the word order goes back to normal, subject before verb, and there's no inversion.
We also drop words like do, does, or did because it's no longer a direct question, but part of a statement. Here's a step-by-step way to form one. Start with a direct question. What time does the store open? Then add an introductory phrase like do you know or can you tell me? After that, remove the inversion and keep normal statement order. So, do you know what time the store opens?
Now, there's one more important thing to remember. If the original question is a yes or no question, we use if or whether to introduce it in the indirect form. For example, the direct question is she coming? The indirect version becomes, do you know if she is coming? Or do you know whether she is coming? Both are correct.
That's the key rule. In direct questions, English inverts the subject and the verb. In indirect questions, English returns to normal order. That's why we say, what is your name, in a direct question, but can I ask what your name is, in an indirect one? Same meaning, different structure. So when you see a sentence ending with a question mark, pause and ask yourself, is this a yes-no question or a WH question? That will tell you which word order formula to follow. And remember our extra words trick. Not every word in the list will be used, so focus on building a sentence that is grammatically correct and logical. Once you get this down, even the trickiest TOEFL sentences start to feel predictable. You'll recognize the pattern, place the auxiliary or modal first, keep the main verb in place, and slot in subjects and complements correctly. Suddenly, it's not magic, it's a puzzle you can solve systematically.
Now that we've reviewed sentence moods, verb structures, and inversion, we're ready to tackle the actual 2026 TOEFL Build a Sentence questions and see how all these grammar ideas come alive in real examples. Let's start with the first one. What was the highlight of your trip? Words given were, the, was, old city, showed us around, who, tour guides. First, we identify the verb. The only verbs that can logically come before fantastic are was and were, because the adjective fantastic needs a linking verb. That tells us something was or were fantastic. Next, what can be fantastic? Candidates are old city, singular, or tour guides, plural. The clue is in the word who, which is a relative pronoun for people. That tells us the subject must be a person, so tour guides is the right choice. Now the relative clause, who showed us around, modifies tour guides. Notice how we also need a direct object for showed, the old city. Because the city is a countable noun, it needs a determiner, which we have here, the old city. Putting it all together, the sentence becomes, the tour guides who showed us around the city were fantastic. Notice we did not use was because the plural subject tour guides requires were. 2. I heard Anna got a promotion. Blank, 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 she will be blank, blank. Words given, a different department, if, moving to, no, do, you. Step 1, recognize this is a yes-no question about a fact. That means we likely need do at the start because the main verb isn't be or have. The subject should be you, and the main verb is know, so the first 3 words are, do you know? Next, since she will be moving to a different department is a noun clause, we need a word to introduce it. Noun clauses are often introduced by interrogative pronouns like who, which, or conditional words like if or whether. Here, if works perfectly. Do you know if she will be? Finally, the remainder of the clause fills in the predicate, moving to a different department. So the complete sentence is, do you know if she will be moving to a different department? 3. We're planning a trip to the mountains next weekend. Blank, 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 blank. Words given, the, cabins, available, weather, can, will, be, you, tell me. Because of the question mark, we start with an auxiliary verb like can.
The subject is you, and the main verb is tell me, which is ditransitive. It takes both a direct and an indirect object. Next, since the question is asking about the availability of the cabins, we need an embedded clause introduced by whether, which functions like if in indirect questions. After the clause, normal word order applies. Subject followed by verb. The sentence becomes, can you tell me whether the cabins will be available? 4. I'm looking forward to the concert this weekend. Words given, does, what, time, it, start. Here we have a WH question asking for specific information, in this case the time of the concert. The order follows the formula question word, followed by an auxiliary word, followed by the subject and the main verb. Answer, what time does it start? 5. The museum exhibition opens next month. Words given, do, you, how, no, tickets, will cost, much. This question is structured like example 2, a polite inquiry using do you know. The verb know requires an object, and here the object is a noun clause. The question is about the price of the tickets, so we introduce it with how much, then follow normal word order within the clause, subject, then verb. Answer, do you know how much the tickets will cost?
Let's continue with our next set of TOEFL Build a Sentence questions. 6. I'm planning to go to the beach tomorrow. Words given, is, time of year, what, the water, this, like, temperature. Here, the question mark and the interrogative word what tell us that this is a question about the water temperature at the beach tomorrow. The word what can function as either a pronoun or an adjective. That's why what is the water temperature works. You might think what temperature is the water also works if you were asking for a specific number. So which should we choose? There are 7 blanks in the question, which means we also need to include the word like. Now, like is a comparison word. A is like B means that A and B are similar in some way. If we tried to add like to what temperature is the water like, it doesn't make sense. This structure is basically saying water equals temperature, which is illogical. On the other hand, what is the water temperature like makes perfect sense. Here, the subject is water temperature, and like asks for a description, warm, cold, or somewhere in between. Finally, we add the time phrase at this time of year to complete the question. Correct sentence? What is the water temperature like this time of year? This is a challenging question because you need to understand the meaning clearly to choose the correct structure. 7. I need to buy groceries today. Words given, list, do, a, have, shopping. This one is simpler. The main verb is have, which is not an auxiliary verb, so we start with do. The object of have is a shopping list, so the sentence becomes, do you have a shopping list? 8. I'll be taking a cooking class this weekend. Words given, learn, what, will, you, recipes. This is a WH question. We start with what, then follow the order of auxiliary, subject, main verb. If we try to use what as a pronoun for the object, there would be no place for recipes. Instead, what functions as an adjective, what recipes, then followed by auxiliary, subject, verb. What recipes will you learn? 9. What did Maria ask you about the book you're reading? Words beginning, she wanted a copy by to know where she. This is a statement, so we follow subject, verb, object. The subject is she, the verb is wanted, and wanted requires a to infinitive as its object, to know. The object of know is a noun clause introduced by the question word where, followed by normal word order for the embedded question, subject, modal, verb, object. She wanted to know where she could buy a copy. 10. How did you prepare for the exam? Words given, by,
the professor, that the study guide was provided it. Here the adjective used is the study guide, which answers what was used. The study guide is described with a relative clause that was provided by the professor. The clause uses passive voice, and the prepositional phrase by the professor shows who provided it. Answer: I used the study guide that was provided by the professor. By approaching each sentence this way, first identifying the mood, then the subject, verb, complements, and finally modifiers, you can tackle every build-a-sentence question systematically. All the grammar we've studied, verb structures, inversion, auxiliary placement, and complements, come alive as these examples. That's all we have for today. Whether you are preparing for the 2025 or 2026 TOEFL, you can now sign up for Dr. Burns' courses. There's a free upgrade to 2026, and by learning a little about English every day, you gradually build mastery. There's no shortcut, only consistent daily practice.